All right, team. Oh, going through some of my library. There's so many books in my office that I forget what books I have. I mean, I think I've even got books back in my storage area, only to find out my kids can't shut off the light. I think my buddy John Wellborn said he's a professional light shutter offer. That's what happens when you have kids. You know, they're like, yeah, I ain't paying these bills. I'll do what I want. So, a lot of books. I need to organize, no doubt about it. I try to kind of keep training books and business books separate. You know, there's some business books here for sure. But then over here we have business, philosophy, and some kind of more, I guess, like fitness books. Although I could come across here and see Herschel Walker's, you know, basic training. And I actually just shared on my guy Jeremy. I just shared on Twitter. I said, man, how many strength and conditioning coaches post videos on social media that are just these kind of novel exercises that they wouldn't really do, but they're like, I'm more likes and views. They're just chasing it. And I said, I cannot live that way. I just refuse to go down that rabbit hole of fakeness. And that's what the underground stood for since day one, was the raw style of training. And we see these videos and it's like, man, why would I do that when this athlete can't even squat heavy, or doesn't even, can't do 10 pull-ups or weighted pull-ups, and can't jump and sprint great? Why am I doing this fancy stuff? It's pretty frustrating. And so let's flip this around. Let's take a look here. Got some great books here. I remember John Wellborn told me to get this book. I'm just not a cook like he is a chef. Strength Manual for Running. Every West Side book, honestly, has a lot of crossover. Max effort, dynamic effort, jumping, a lot of assistance work, not being afraid to build muscle. Let's flip this around. Books up here. Anything by Dan John is a great book. Okay, this Scientific Principles, older book by Chad Wesley Smith. Right here, Triad. Gifted book by Joe DeSena, mindset book. And then a lot of books I don't like. Oh wow, I didn't realize I had an extra one of these. Basically, whoever leaves a great 5-star review on the Strong Life podcast is going to get one of those. But you could see this was a Dev Gru book that Marty Gallagher made for Dev Gru. But you could see a lot of ebooks. I just print them out. I don't even read ebooks. They kind of make me crazy staring at a computer. This book, I got to tell you, man, coaches need to read that. They're so afraid of heavy strength training now. Like everybody's like, oh, so strong. This is a very powerful book, The Power of Optimism. I'm going to have to put that on my book and dig in. I remember reading this book, A Season on the Mat, when I was a middle school wrestling coach. Screw It, Let's Do It, Richard Branson. I read that book right about when I left teaching in 2009. Seal Fit, I used that book to help me prepare for the 20X challenge, which I helped Mark Devine create when I told him, listen, I don't have any desire to do your Kokoro challenge, which is 60 hours. And so I read that book and said, hey, man, let's do something that's for a day. I've got a lot of older books here. I'm going to flip this around. If anybody has questions, please just post a comment. Oh, man, this bookshelf's not even surviving. Anything I purchased from Matt Wenning, I print it out. And again, Matt is a friend, and of course, I buy. That's how you support friends. You don't ask for free shit. Jeremy's asking the Kelso Shrug book. Jeremy, let me know if you want to join in on this live chat with me. Just do a request. Jeremy's one of our speakers at Underground Strength Con. I do have the Texas powerlifting book. It's on the other shelf. Dinosaur training, very good. Although I did that podcast, the Old School Strength podcast, and of course I'm drawing a blank forgetting the name. How many books have you read so far? Oh, several hundred books easily. Not only several hundred books, you could see I've got all the older books and the magazines in here. Here, many of them in there. Many more in here. Look at this. This is the bodybuilding magazine from when I won the Mr. Israel bodybuilding show in 1994. Oh no, Jeremy, don't worry about it. Keep driving. But let me show you guys something. In Israel, the writing is right to left. But yeah, that's me. Very hard to see. But I remember this is me taking first. This kid second, and this kid third. I think that kid was from Russia. I remember this guy was massive, lots of drugs, Mr. Israel, NABA, Mr. Universe. Here's the picture of me. This is, 1994, NABA Israel. My legs were pretty jacked, and with just like 2 weeks before the show, I decided to do it. Pretty crazy, but I think back then they were like stealing a lot of photos. I remember this guy was very ripped. Hard to see because everything is black and white. This guy was very big. This was before like a lot of the steroids really made their way. You know, these guys were definitely on some drugs, but not as much. Chuck Norris. This is the guy's name was Eliana. Jim Quinn, pro bodybuilder from Long Island, actually follows me. This guy would have to be now like close to 55. You know, if I'm 48, maybe he's more like closer to 60. Shows you how fast time flies. Oh, my guy Jeremy's popping on. Favorite book I was asked about. Tough call. Could be Arnold's Encyclopedia of Education. Jeremy, you didn't have to pull over. You're the man.
We're good, man. Let's do it.
So where are you coming from? Were you coaching just now?
Yeah, just got done. Had a late group tonight. A couple of my lifters, a couple people from out of town. Or like one girl drives in about an hour away. She's a new power lifter. Another kid drive about 45 minutes away. He's another new power lifter. Both of them got good potential. So, yeah.
And what was tonight's training? What was the main lift?
Tonight, Zach, a lot of them are in the strength classes at their schools. So when they come in, you can't really have a plan because you never know what they're going to do. So they did some of their Olympic lifts in class. They didn't go real heavy on their squats. They hit a lot of Olympic lifts, and then just coach put them through some circuits. So we hit more of the power lifts. I got a girl who's a thrower, and she's going to be a really good power lifter too. So worked on benches with her tonight because she's got to catch her upper body up to her lower body. They're teaching her push jerks. So I said, hey, she goes, hey, I'm not very good. Can you review that? So I went over that with her. And then we just hit a lot of ab work and accessories she's not getting done.
It's interesting. Like I try to say it not in a rude manner, not trying to be rude to, coaches or anybody listening. But I say, listen, when I'm training 40, 60, or 80 athletes at a time, I'm not getting the quality of work done that happens at the underground strength gym when I've got a group of, 8, 10, 12, sometimes just 5 or 6. And I also don't have the equipment to get it done. I don't have boxes for jumping. And, that's just the reality of it. So for when parents are like, well, my son is lifting at school, my daughter's lifting at school, I tell them, man, have you forgotten what it's like to be 15 years old? Do you remember when I would tell them growing up in the 80s, we would ride our bikes for 12 hours a day and we didn't overtrain or need to go to the chiropractor or the whoever to get the recovery. And so some of the kids I train, Jeremy, will lift during the strength class, which goes from so they go 11, 17, 11. It goes from like 11:30 until about 12:25. I get about 55 minutes with them. And some of them come back not even 2 hours later for another training session. And when I see that, I'm like, damn, just to be young again, like you're an unstoppable force.
Yeah. Zach, the school I was at previously, Center Grove High School, which is a top sports school in the state of Indiana, those guys would lift during the class day. And what you just said is they would come back, especially the football guys, they would come back for a second session and we could pound on them even more. And those guys still made progress and they were state champs. So while most programs are struggling to lift once during the day, those guys were lifting twice a day, several times a week, and coming in on Saturdays. We had an open gym for those guys as well.
Yeah, I'm starting to like, sometimes I catch myself getting too conservative, and then I'm like, man, these kids actually need more
Yep.
work.
Yes.
It allows you to catch up on things. Or let's say they only did 4 sets of squats, light, medium, 2 working sets. You could come back and do that again. It's like,
Bulgarians did it, man, several times a day.
I think of it all the time, the old program. I'm older than you, but Tom Platz and Leo Costa went out to Bulgaria and saw the weightlifters, and they tried copying it and doing it to the bodybuilders. It was just like the early days of people selling bullshit.
Yeah.
And whenever I see kids training twice a day, I'm like, oh, Bulgarian Power Burst is what it was called. It was like such a great name. But my hope is that the extra training inspires and spikes their appetite and gets them to want to eat more. Because as you know, I saw that before and after photo of that kid, just 3 years. That looks more like a 6 to 8 year transformation. That kid got so big.
Yeah. Well, he's again, what you just said, he's the kid that lifts in class. He comes with me. He's in with me. So he's in class, 3-4 days a week, whatever their schedule is. Then he's with me in the off season. We're at least 3 days a week. And
Yeah.
then during the wrestling season, minimum, he's in there twice a week. Plus he has the class. Summertime, he has to report for training 2 or 3 days a week. And then we kicked up to 3 or 4 days a week with me. I mean, there's no mistake why, with that kid. I mean, that's about a 3.5 year transformation. But his dad, when he couldn't drive, his dad was here all the time. He'd be like, hey, I'm dropping this kid off at this time. I got to go drop my daughter off. By that time, I'll be back to pick him up, pick my daughter up, then we're heading home.
That
So
is the family life. That is the runaround. My daughter has her license, so that has really alleviated a lot of our travel stress. But like today, my wife took my son to crew. But all last week, it was my father taking him while I'm at my daughter's tennis.
Yep.
And then sometimes after my daughter has a match, she'll have a match, come home and eat, then drive about 45 minutes north for an hour of tennis, drive back. So on top of her school stuff, she'll do extra training, and the drive alone is an hour and a half. But that's what the best do. It's really the way it is. And what I'm seeing, I wonder if it's like this in Ohio and Indiana. I'm seeing the best just keep getting further and further away, and this it's like a top 3 to 5%, and then this other area, it's like a big gray area, is just way behind. Are you seeing that where you are?
Yeah, 100%. It's like, I'll give you an example. Like you were just talking about growing up, the Voinovich brothers, who I help out at the University of Iowa for wrestling. When I had their dad, I would do my wrestling practice at my school, get in, drive up to his where he was at, go practice with him. He had Sundays practices. I'd go practice with him during that time. I would lift, in the mornings, and I would go train with him later on in the evenings. Like that's just the way it is. But absolutely, like those boys separated themselves too. I mean, they were elite guys. They were both University of Iowa on scholarships. They separated themselves, man, and they just kept pushing and pushing. And everyone's like, why are these guys beating me? Why are these guys tech falling me? I mean, if you would see their work ethic and how many times a day they train, and the running still, I mean, those guys were 2-3 days at a time, or 2-3 times a day training. I mean, they separated themselves, and that's why they're great. And I 100% agree with you. Those guys keep getting better. You and I just watched that Bo Bassett thing on Flow Wrestling. I mean, that kid's up at 5 a.m., no parents around, and he's got that other stud in there too. And those guys are elite level, and they can go any college they want to.
I keep thinking to myself, like, man, I would love to tell Bo Bassett, hey, man, sleep in, get your recovery. But I think a lot of times I wake up early. I'm just excited to work and life. And I think he's excited to wrestle. And Bo Bassett still has like kind of a baby face. And I think he's nowhere near peak. I think in 2 to 3 years, once he starts like doing more strength training. I know he already does strength training at the Compound Wrestling Club.
Mm-hmm.
Once his body takes to it, man, he's going to make people are going to be in big trouble with him because of his passion and love for the sport, which I think is something that is attractive for these college coaches, because I think there's, the top 10 teams are getting the winners, but are you getting a kid that loves to train so much, and that inspires the teammates around you?
Yeah,
So
absolutely, man. Absolutely. I mean, look. I think he's like a David Taylor. Like, remember how babyface David Taylor was going to Penn State, and
yeah,
then David blew up. And if you looked at him at the U.S. Open wrestling, I mean, he is jacked. He is huge. He is back, kicking ass. Like it was good. I think Bo's like on that same thing with him.
somebody told me, man, I may have been at like a Beat the Streets event. That's where it was. I remember I was with Rutgers. We were at Beat the Streets in New York City, and somebody, I overheard them. They had gone out to eat the night before with David Taylor, and they said David Taylor like devoured 2 ribeye steaks for dinner. And it
If
was,
you're,
he started getting into strength training and eating properly. I still have wrestlers telling me, "Oh, I got to start cutting down." I go, "Let me ask you guys a question. If you were the coach standing in front of a crowded room of wrestlers, would you tell them, hey guys, the secret to your success is to starve yourself, go hungry and have no energy to train and just get as weak as possible?" And they're like, no. I was like, well, that's what you're doing when you're doing this weight cutting. You're skipping meals. I said, what if you could come home from practice, devour an awesome meal, and have energy to strength train? Like what you said, Jeremy, I was thinking to myself, I don't see athletes as frequently as I once did,
Mhm.
and realizing like they could and should train more. But a lot of wrestlers in New Jersey go to high school practice, go home and eat, and go straight to the club. And then in season, they're just doubling their wrestling volume,
Yeah.
no strength training, and they miss their peak because you could only hold on to that strength and power for so long before you lose it, since they're not training for it.
Yeah, Zach, there's a great movie on YouTube called Pin. It had Lance Palmer, 4-time All-American from Ohio State University, 4-time state champ in Ohio. And it showed his dad was like feeding him like some cake and some stuff like around Thanksgiving time. And he goes, listen, he goes, my boys can eat this stuff because they're going to go burn it off. And the kid was working out 2 or 3 times a day. And the dad even said, he goes, hey, he's wrestling at St. Ed's. St. Ed's has him from 3 to 5 every day. He goes, I have him in the morning and the rest of the time afterwards. And he goes, he was sitting there not eating a whole bunch of junk, but the kid was filling his plate up, but he goes, his dad's like, he's just going to work it off later. He's got a running program. He's got a lifting, plus he has practice. So the dad was just fueling the kids up because he knew that. And Lance was undefeated, almost undefeated, Ironman champion, 4-time All-American at Ohio State.
Well, you know what I also think of, Jeremy, that I don't announce it or say it enough, but eating, elevates our spirits. And wrestling can have a lot of emotional ups and downs, especially if you're not winning a lot. So let's say you're losing and you're starving yourself. Now you're depressed. Now you hate the sport. And I remember at my high school, our heavyweight, when his junior year was 189, and then next year was 230. And I remember he's like, yeah, man, after practice, I go to 7-Eleven and I get this drink and I eat this and that. And back then I'm young, it doesn't sound good. I don't encourage people to go drink Slurpees and all this stuff. But if my son was wrestling, I would want him to wrestle up. I'd be like, dude, I'm sending you to school with all this food. Then you're going to come home. You're going to have a freaking massive dinner. Then we'll do short workout later in the evening. I think in season, we train guys 40 minutes in the beginning of the season. Then it starts creeping down, and by the end of the season, they do a 25-minute lift.
Mhm.
But on average, I'd like to see a wrestler twice a week for 30 minutes to do their strength work.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you look at all the college wrestlers. I mean, rarely does a guy move down. They all move up. And I tell you, all my high school wrestlers, rarely does someone say, oh, man, I wish I would have cut down my senior year. I wish I would have done this. They all say, hey, I wish I would have gone up, or hey, I wish I would have gone up sooner. All this muscle I built in the offseason went to waste. Victor Voinovich right now, he's going to be moving up a weight class. He feels great lifting again, Zach. He's excited to move up. He's built himself up where he can handle
He's
it. His younger brother.
the
Yeah,
older brother.
Victor's the older one. He went 2-2 at the NCAA's. So,
Nice.
yeah,
He's gonna
but
he's gonna be a force, especially getting strong. My buddy Coach Coco posted, said, "What about when Kyle Dake won 4 NCAA titles in 4 different weight classes?" And not only that, he couldn't redshirt because he was at the Ivy Leagues.
yeah,
So Kyle Dake, I've always found in college 1 or 2 of the guys cut weight, And then what are you focused on when you train? You're not focused on getting better. You're just focused on losing weight. You need to be able to focus on getting better. And so nutrition is the make or break factor. Our guy, Evan Marcus, just hopped on. Evan's the strength coach for the Arizona Cardinals. Evan and I always talk about this brilliance with the basics, eating steak, chicken, eggs, drinking milk. He was mentored by Uncle Tony Datillo, Anthony Datillo, Power Act training.
Gotcha.
Right.
That's awesome, man.
So it's like, I mean, I think strength has been demonized, and I believe experts need to bring it back. And when I say strength training, I also mean jumping, sprinting, building body armor, not just be strong and ignore all the other factors. And I know you do a lot. You do a lot of the same.
Yeah, I mean, I take a look at the kids' practice. If they're getting a lot in, you and I were just chatting about what Iowa's doing for the wrestling. So it's like, well, hey, if they're getting all this in practice, what do you and I need to do as coaches in the weight room? Because this is already done over here. What else do we need to do? Because we need to work around that.
Yep, fill the gaps. Now, you asked about one of the books, the Texas Powerlifting. So I have Super Squats from Iron Mind.
Okay.
And then the Texas Powerlifting book is somewhere on my bookshelf. Do you have a favorite book, Jeremy, that you could remember? I tend to not be able to remember my favorite book.
I mean, I like Kelso, another one, Kelso wrote that one.
Yes.
He's got some great basics in there for powerlifting programs.
Yes.
I love this shrug book because I tell you what, when we build up my guys' upper backs for our lifters, man, like their lifts go up. They're able to hold bench press arches. They have a top shelf on their squat. Their cleans go up because they actually have something to actually pull to. Deadlifts go up. I mean, the more you can really bat that upper back in with heavier weights, the better off you're going to be. And also, I mean, Mark Garrett, Mark and I talk a lot about front squats. We use a lot of front squats to build up the upper back, not just legs.
When you front squat, Jeremy, are you guys doing bodybuilder or weightlifter style?
Both, Zach. If I have a kid that's going to a school that's doing a lot of Olympic lifts or something like that, I will make him do most of the time the clean position.
Yes.
But if not, I'll stick with, again, keeping it simple. If they don't have the flexibility like some of my upper weights, I'm not. There we go, man. That is something everybody needs to read about Kelso, his shrug work in there. He's got a lot of stuff for Olympic lifts, powerlifting, bodybuilding. Man, we use the heck out of that stuff, man.
I'm going to give these books to Nate Stout. He's our new coach at the Underground.
Okay.
Those books they're just so good. I can't really put a finger on. I'm trying to look at my bookshelf. You know what I love, Jeremy? I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this. I'll flip it around. I love these older books from York Barbell, like Strength and Development and, Development of Muscular Bulk and Power. But then just the title of this book is so good. Look at this. How to Get Strong and Stay So. Somebody actually sent this book to me as a gift. You could buy a lot of these books used on not eBay. You could do it on eBay, but you could buy a lot of these books used on Amazon and just get them cheaper. But some very old books here that I love.
Do you have any Bill Starr, The Strongest Shall
Oh,
Survive?
yeah. It is. I think it's at my school.
Okay.
And I have multiple copies of it. Now, if you're looking for it, they're usually selling them for like $250. But I like to keep it on my desk at the office at school because it, to me, is a reminder. My buddy Alan Cosgrove told me 20 years ago. He said, Zach, sometimes you just need to keep a book on your desk so you could see the title.
Yep.
And, for me, that book is like Stephen Pressfield's Turning Pro. I've got a lot of books up here. I'm kind of looking at them, but the older books to me are great. And my buddy Craig Fitzgerald, Boston College, he loves Strongest Shall Survive, full body workouts. That stuff's perfect.
Zach, look,
I believe at the
it
high
is,
school
man.
level.
Yeah, it was strong. There was a heavy day, light day, medium day. I mean, he kept his squat, bench clean, assistance work in there. And look what Bill Starr is. I think he's one of the godfathers of strength conditioning. I mean, the guy was way above his time, and he knew how to train athletes as well as Olympic lifters.
When I had kind of shared some of his content, somebody saw that who was one of his students basically at Johns Hopkins.
Okay,
And,
wow.
yeah, and so we became friends. He lives up in North Jersey, And my friend David is, if I'm 48, I think David might be late 50s. His warm up is still what Bill Starr had him do, which was like 2 exercises, 100 reps each. So might be 100 leg raises and 100 back extensions. And so he does a lot of that. And he's trying to write a book about lessons learned from Bill Starr. And I said, you have to. It's such a perfect way to honor him. And, I think Mark Ripito's publishing company, they wanted to buy Bill Starr's book, but I think his kids or his family members own the rights to the book and they don't want to release that book. And, listen, I wrote my book because I want my great grandchildren who never met me to be able to read about me. I think it's important to get the books out to kind of carry on the legacy. Like this book, this actually is not a book, Jeremy, but it really is a favorite. It's the original Westside Barbell articles in here. And Jim Wendler gave it to me, but that was gifted to him by Dr. Ken Leisner, who I love,
Yep.
even though I'm not like all about the one all-out set, but Jim Wendler gave it to me. And so here's my other copy of Strongest Shall Survive.
Nice.
So I love these older books.
You got any John Davies in there, man? Renegade Training?
I don't.
What? I figured you'd have those, man.
I know, it's so funny. Our buddy Mark Garrett like loves it, and then I look at the reviews. The reviews on Amazon are like horrific. So I'm like, do I need this book or do I just want it? And sometimes I have to say no to a book. I've got a lot.
I got all his articles in a binder. I got stuff highlighted from him because he used to like Westside Barbell Training. Louis mentioned him. He was big on speed and everything, but he's also big about lifting heavy, man. That was his big thing with John Davies, and he got brought into a lot of NFLs and colleges for speed and heavy training.
He would write. Where did you print his articles from? T Nation, T Mag.
I used to get off. I think it was like RenegadeTraining.com or something. Yeah, that's right. He did have T Nation because I had a binder of John Davies. I had a binder of Dave Tate. I had a binder of Louis Simmons, all his stuff, and I had highlighted stuff in there, man.
I think I still. Yep, it's right here. I'm gonna flip this around. This is my original printout of Westside articles from a while ago. And then there was a DVD made called Blitz. Ryan Lee partnered with those guys who were called the SST Canada, Sports Specific Training Canada. And those guys inspired me because they were doing sandbag training.
Okay.
They had tree logs cut in half, and then they drilled handles. And then they would do clean and press with the tree logs. Truck pushing, sled drags, all that kind of stuff that was early days underground. And I loved it. And it was Larry Justanis and somebody else. Dang it. And then Steve, it was like that. The names rhymed. It was Larry Justanis and Steve Bodanis. And I remember listening to an interview with them. And he's like, listen, man, if somebody's struggling to gain muscle, I might want to do something that really pushes their like growth hormone and spikes their appetite. And he's like, I might do high volume squats and farm walks. And he's like, but then I might mix in bodybuilding work just to get the hypertrophy. So I might add 5 sets of 10 leg curls. Jim Wendler, I think, does a great job with 5-3-1. He'll do the lift and then it'll say 50 push-ups, 50 pull-ups, or do 50 push downs, 50 rows. You could break it up 5x10, 20, 20, 10. You could break it up however you want, but that 50 or 100 reps builds muscle. And as you know, Jeremy, it just gets you to work.
Yep.
We need more workers.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's good, especially since you said about the growth hormone release and everything. That super squats, man. If you ever done those 20 high rep breathing squats he talks about on there, oh man, that will spike stuff up. And I tell you, when you squat multiple times a week, Mark Garrett and I chat about this, like even with the younger kids, these kids seem to get more mature. It releases hormones in them. Their lifts go up, everything, man. If you look at even when I talked to Russian bench only guys, when I was in IPF world teams, even the Russian benchers would squat twice a week because they knew how important it was for hormone production, even in their bench presses and in their overall athleticism.
Right. So like I think to myself, there's got to be somebody out there saying, well, what is the science behind how do you know they're releasing more hormones? Well, I don't know. We're not doing a blood test before and after.
Yeah.
But what happens is there's like a massive stressor on the body. And by the way, I try to really make it simple. I said massive stressor on the body. I listen to other strength coaches, Jeremy, and they're like, what about the global stress on the organism? I'm like, just say a fucking person. Stop saying, calling the person an organism. It sounds so fake. You know, you're trying to sound smart. So,
Yeah.
you know, I trained lacrosse at my high school yesterday, and they'll come back Thursday. And one of the kids is now a senior, but he was so skinny his freshman year that I didn't feel like doing 5x5 was the way. It was like I needed him to get more volume. So I told him about super squats, and I said, make sure you ask Santa to get you the book Super Squats. Well, I see him a day or two later. He goes, I found a bootleg copy of Super Squats on the internet. I said, of course. Like I said, I forgot your generation is the reason why like all those websites popped up where everybody shares PDFs.
Yep.
So he would say to me, he's like, Coach, can I do super squats? He didn't say 20 rep squats. I said, Michael, I love that you call them super squats. And he started doing sets of 20 with, 65 pounds, then 85, then 95, then 135, and probably worked up to about 185 for 20. And look, he's a senior now, but he's got a great physique. He's kind of got that wiry build. You know, he's not like massive. He's very lean, but I believe those volume squats,
Yep.
the super squats, played a role. And I know, like, there's a time and place for it, deep off season, when you could handle being sore.
Yep.
So
Zach, even if you look at some of the Smolov routines that are very popular because they get you results real fast, squatting 4 times a week, benching 4 times a week. I even get my powerlifters several times a year. We go through about at least 2, maybe 3 training blocks a couple times a year where we cut out the assistance work. We focus on that. And not only do they get a ton of practice squatting with everything, their lifts go up. They're getting away from assistance work, so they're not banging up their elbows and shoulders and everything else through that. It gives them a break. And when they get done, I know it's only short term, but man, their technique is improved. They feel way more confident. They've gotten so many sets and reps and all that stuff. So any high rep training, any small out thing, you got to be careful. Like you said, you obviously I don't want to give it to an in-season person, but it's great to run the off season. Some of my athletes really like it too. I had Silas, the guy you just saw, like I ran him through that and he loves it too, gets a break from everything else. And his technique really improves and he takes more pride because he's figuring out, hey, I did this wrong this set. Hey, I understand what this is. I'm like, hey, you got to come back and squat tomorrow too, man. So he goes, yeah, I know. So
it's interesting how so many people get afraid of the work, especially strength coaches. And I openly admit that there's times where I find myself being too conservative, like, hey, this is too much work. But then I remind myself, like, man, maybe doing the more work will inspire them to be better with nutrition and recovery. Because if they're not trained hard enough, they just always feel too good. And there's like no reason to take nutrition and recovery seriously enough. Like I was listening to a podcast with my buddy Mike Wadango. It's called Mike and Brooker, and they had Ralph Ullman on. Ralph is, I think, he's a sprint coach, track coach, works with Olympians. I can't remember what country he's from, but he was saying that these guys are so fast that when they do Nordic leg curls, they get like it beats up their hamstrings because they sprint so fast. And he was like struggling to find exercises that could be done to benefit sprinters. And I was thinking to myself, man, I have to listen to the rest of it. They got Will Rattel on there, and Will is big with weightlifting and lifting heavy, jumping, sprinting. I look at it as if they don't do the strength work and they don't do enough general physical preparation, maybe their body is less durable, but I've never trained an Olympic sprinter like Ralph has. So I'm listening to their conversation. And Skiba here said, 80s and 90s, greatest gains for me ever. When I trained at Atlantic Health Club, it was like this little room and there was 2 light bulbs hanging. There was no like actual like lights. It was just 2 light bulbs and a mixture of weights, regular dumbbells, globe dumbbells, all free weights. They did have a cable crossover unit, but it was rope. There was no cable.
Nice.
It was like a caveman
Yeah.
machine.
Zach,
Crazy.
I think you're right because I had a great talk with Dave Tate just recently, a few months ago, and when Louis was training Butch Reynolds, 400-meter Olympic gold medalist, and Butch wanted to come back with everything. Well, Butch kept pulling his hamstring over and over again, and one deal Louis said is you're going to have to commit to strength training with us, and you are going to have to be doing this stuff. One thing that Louis did with him, and Dave helped with it too, was they did a lot of belt squats during that time because they said his leverages just weren't good for regular squatting. But they did a lot of those. He could not do any glute ham raises. Again, Zach, you wonder why he kept pulling his hamstring. And even Louis made fun of him. He goes, you can't even do one of these. He goes, no wonder you keep pulling it.
Right.
And they got him trained up very well on that stuff. They did do partial ranges on his max effort days for his upper body.
Right.
Louis just said with his limbs being the way they are, there's just a safer, more better position for him because they wanted to put some strength on him. And again, when they made a deal, and when Butch got away from this stuff, because he went to run the European tour for like the last 4 weeks before the Olympics, he went against it, and they never saw him again. And Butch, it was like the second heat in the Olympics or second round or whatever, ended up pulling that hamstring because he got away from the strength training again. And when Louis and Dave Tate had him training, he wasn't pulling anything. And when he went away from that, that's when he pulled that again. He never saw him in the Olympic finals after that. But Butch realized that, and Butch brought a lot of his sprint athletes because he runs one in Columbus, Ohio. He's got his own track program there. He brings them a lot in. I had a talk with Mo. I can't remember her last name. She was on the Olympic team.
Moesha Robinson.
It might have been her. She was on the 4x4. Louis talked about her a little bit in some of hers, but I called her and talked to her, and she goes, the strength training, what Louis had me doing was the best I've ever done. She goes, because in track and field in college, they didn't let us train that heavy, or they were always worried about stuff. She goes, I got some of my best results when I was training heavy at Westside Barbell.
Yeah, that's Mo Robinson,
Okay.
Moesha Robinson. It'd be interesting to hear about, there's a Jersey girl. I'm not sure where she is. Sydney McLaughlin. She's like crushing the 400 and the hurdles. She works with, of course, I'm drawing a blank. The guy does a ton of the cars, like Dr. John Quint does, like all the joint stuff. She does it with her, probably everything, like hips, spine, and I feel embarrassed that I'm forgetting her coach's name, but I follow him. But he must be getting her strong through these new ranges of motion, allows her body to just, how do you say, access strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like where we are in this world is people keep talking about speed, speed, speed. And I say, well, it depends who you're working with. I work with high school athletes who many of them are not strong enough. So I blend it all. I got strength, power. That's where we're jumping and throwing or moving lighter weights with, as high velocity as possible. And then speed, where we sprint. And so I think to myself, if I was like, oh, we're too strong, we would not do good at all. Listen, I have kids today squatting 95 pounds, 115, 225. So what do we need more of? You got to be squatting 1.5, twice your body weight for a couple reps. You got to bench. I just think like a real basic standard, an average standard is benching your body weight for 5. Yep. We need to see 1.5 times 5. And then we need to look at sprinting, jumping. And it's like, in my opinion, you got to look at who you're working with. So right now I'm listening to a podcast by Rolf, who trains Olympians and gold medalists. I'm not going to take everything he says and apply it to a teenager who's, barely breaking into the varsity track lineup. But I know that I tell track kids in high school, strength training is your secret weapon, because most kids strength training.
Well, Lee Taffel, luckily he was in my area for 2 years, and I spent a lot of time in his garage. Lee's one of the best speed coaches out there. And Lee, when he would bring people over who would sign up for speed training with him, guess what, Zach? He'd spend the first 20, 30 minutes on speed training. Guess what the other 30 minutes was? Strength training. He goes, I can only do so much and work on so much technique and so much sprint work, because the rest of these kids need a base level of strength. So it's funny when you're signing up for Lee Taff, one of the best speed coaches of all time, and half the workout's speed work and the other half is general strength training, man.
I did he used to be up in
New York,
to Lake George. So when I went to my place in Lake George, he was holding a coaches mastermind, and there was like coaches there from the Caribbean islands. They were traveled from all over. So I remember taking them through body weight training. But I learned from Lee. First seminar I attended with Lee was '04 in Chicago, back in the early days of the IYCA. But I think we got it all, right? Like, for the people listening, don't go so far down strength, don't go so far down speed. Learn to blend it all together. And then when do you need it? Like you were talking about, hey, I said, what's the program today? Well, it depends. What did the kids do today?
Yep.
Sometimes kids will squat at school or clean at school. I'll say, how many sets did you do? They'll say 3. Oh, because you got a 35-minute class. Okay, 3 sets. Let's do 3 more sets and just go speed and technique. Because 6 to 10 sets of a main lift, I like it because you're getting more work. And now we're not at school. Sometimes the clock and the flow is what we're trying to work with, as you know, rather than this perfect program. Today, I trained freshman football. I got 20-something minutes with them. 3 workout. I did 3 exercises as a circuit. You could trap bar deadlift or dumbbell squat for 6. Then you were dumbbell benching for 6. Then I gave them a body weight calisthenics exercise choice. So I went, okay, you guys tell me, what would you do? Some did squat jumps, lunge jumps, push-ups, pull-ups, recline row. Just getting those calisthenics. I was like, dude, this looks so basic on paper, but we're getting volume. We're doing strength. We're doing power. There were some kids deadlifting 275. My daughter's watching. She's like, she's like, does my daddy know what he's talking about?
Yes, he does. Yeah. Zach, it was the same thing. I tell you what, when we were at Center Grove, I mean, we had 9 kids go Division I in football on scholarship. And Zach, our program was Bill Stars. It was front squat, bench, clean, pull-ups, and ab work. And then we do the same thing, a little lighter percentage. And then we do the same thing a little more. But then they would come in after school and get their accessory work in with everything. Plus, they had speed training with Coach Moore. Coach Moore is the head football coach there. The guy's he's one of the few guys that won a state championship in football, and in the same year won a state championship as the head track coach.
Oh, dang.
So, again, they're getting their speed training with Coach Moore twice a week. I was there with all his stuff. Plus, they were lifting twice a day, 3 times a week, if not 4. And it was so simple. Like, people are like, what are you guys doing over there? What's this? It was front squat, back squat maybe, bench, clean, some basic accessory work. And we had 9 guys go Division I one year off that.
But they did it great. And yes, Bill Starr did a circuit. People don't realize it was a circuit because he didn't have enough equipment. The groups were massive. And I think it boosted their GPP. Whereas today, if you're not pushing the pace a little bit, the kids are not fit enough to withstand the season. And so as the practice gets midway through, the season gets midway through, injuries come about. Bye, Summers. Love you. Injuries come about because they don't have the physical durability, which another nerd phrase out there is robust. They could, I feel like I should beat up some of the influencers. Like, you just got to make them cry a little bit, not too much.
Well, Zach, since you're talking about that, the best year I had 2 state champions that year. I had Hayden Watson, who's wrestling at the Citadel Division I. I had Drake Buchanan wrestling at Air Force right now. Hayden and Drake, they stayed all the way through. Like, they had, practice every day. They had lifting class, and they would come and train with me twice a week during the season on top of that when they were dead tired. But I'm telling you what, when it came to state time and everybody else was peaking for sectionals and they were going lighter, because in Indiana you have to go sectionals, regionals, semi-state, and then state. I told the boys, like, yeah, it's 4 weeks, man. I said, are you guys peaking for sectionals? Are we peaking for state here? So I'm going to beat you up during sectionals. I'm going to beat you up during regionals. I'll lighten you up a little bit for semi-state because I want to make sure that they won and got good placings and seats for state. But we trained all the way up through. Zach, they wrestled on Friday, their first night. They still trained Monday and Wednesday that week of state, and they both went out and won state titles. And Hayden Watson came to me. I said, how was it, man? And he goes, Coach, that guy I lost to earlier in the year. He goes, I majored him. I felt stronger. He felt weak. He goes, as soon as I put my hands on him, he goes, I knew I was going to take him. And he goes, I'm like, that's the kid that probably went lighter during sectionals while we were training. And when it came time for state, you were on point. He wasn't.
You know how many athletes stop lifting in season?
Yes.
You name sport, and their parents might train them, have them signed up for training 9 months.
And it's like, but we're training for the end of the season. So then 3 months of missed training, they really start falling back. And it doesn't take much to stimulate the body if you have a nice base and you've been putting in the off-season work. So I always say a great in-season program begins with a consistent off-season program.
Yep.
So if you haven't been training, and this is why I tell coaches, listen, I don't want to train your team in season only. It's dangerous. They have no base. And now we got the stress of practice. Now they're coming in after practice or before, but they're sore all the time. And so you need to train year round. I don't know why I'm still telling coaches that it's almost the year 2025 that you need to get your team in year round.
Drives me nuts, Zach. That's why I quoted you about the whole parents part and getting the kids going. Brooke Kaufman, that All-American high jumper I have, she's at Marion University right now, state placer. Zach, she came to me middle of her track season. It would have been very easy because she had a broken pelvis the year before. She was still rehabbing, and I got connected through some of my other Marion kids, and they said, you got to start with Hartman. And her parents could have waited to the end of track season. They said, hey, her jumps aren't improving. Her hurdle times aren't improving. We need to do something now. Yes. There's like 6-7 weeks left. I said, hey, I can't guarantee anything, but I'll give it my all. And we got her strong enough where the pain went away, Zach. She got better. And all of a sudden she qualified for state when she was in lane 1 of the hurdles. That's like for the kids that are like, hey, good luck. And she ended up winning it, the districts, and going to state. And had her parents not started her with the last 6-7 weeks, she would have been injured. She would have been out, and she wouldn't have qualified. It was that decision.
I love that. That is very smart. Man, I hope we can pull that section out. Some parents are like, it's too late. We don't have time. We're doing something else. I must sound like a dick, but when they say that, I feel like saying, like, you're dumb. You're allowing your son or daughter to be in these sports, but you're not building their confidence because you're allowing them to be average. If you want your kid to be above average, good, okay, not even great, good, they must strength train year round. They need to show up twice a week. Some of our girls who are in swim right now are once a week. They're swimming, 4 hours a day. And so they only have like a Saturday off, or they're swimming Saturday at 6 a.m. But bottom line is, like, you must be strong. It's crazy that, in season, I mean, it's 2024, in the 70s and 80s, coaches said lifting will get you muscle bound. And here we are in 2024, 2025. You have coaches that we're too busy to lift in season. This football team, they started training with me at 215, 240, they're done. I need 25 minutes. If you could do that once a week, I'm at 100% more than zero. And we're stimulating their body. We're getting them more powerful. And also, as you know, I mean, you're getting them confident. Wall Athletics 6th grade football team doing mobility, strength, and speed on our off night. For 6th graders, I would be doing med ball throw, sleds, some jumps, carries, calisthenics, real basic stuff. You gotta hit the road, right, Jeremy? You're driving back, dude. I didn't mean to get you.
No, we're good, man. No, I'm pulled over right now. We're good.
So, Jeremy's going to be one of our speakers and going to be doing a hands-on at the Underground Strength Conference, undergroundstrengthcon.com. Can't wait to see Jeremy, learn from Jeremy. You guys will be able to ask him questions as well. And then we're going to do every day, all the speakers at the end of the day, we'll do an expert panel. We're going to do training, business. But Jeremy, like all the other speakers, all of our speakers are people who do, right? Jeremy is not just, he coaches athletes and powerlifters and then doesn't just get them when they're at the top, he builds them to the top. So I'm excited to learn from you. And I think we're just in a place where I feel Underground Strength Con needs to happen. A lot of people posting stuff online. They don't coach anybody. They don't build anybody. Jeremy is driving home at 9 at night after coaching people. True coach, real coach.
The way it is, man. I had my athletes, they had to drive 45 minutes. They had practice that if you guys are coming in, they're two of my really good ones that got some really good potential for throwing and for powerlifting. So I said, hey, so in between, I started getting my workout in. They came in. We busted ass for a good hour and a half because I try to make a whole good day out of it because they can only come up, once or twice a week.
Yep.
But man, we got it in good. We fixed some stuff, got them strong with everything, built their confidence up. So it's going to be good, man.
I love that people are traveling up to like an hour to train with you for strength training. That doesn't happen anymore, it rarely happens. Sports training, people will do the traveling. Strength training is like people are not putting the priority on it. And our conversations always inspire me to just get our guys better. Tomorrow I got football at my school, and then tomorrow's Wednesday. So I'll have I'm gonna have girls soccer. I'll have football during lunch, after school, girls soccer, and then another football team, JV football. So, Jeremy, you're the man. Have a great night, buddy. And thank you to everybody who popped in. Great conversation with Jeremy Hartman, as always. And we'll talk to you soon. Jeremy, I will share this and invite you as a collaborator. It'll go on Instagram.
Awesome, man. That sounds good, Zach.
Bye, guys. Have a great night.
All right, brother. We'll see you.
Jeremy, later,
Later,
bro.
man.